This is what my game's combat is supposed to look like. But right now, it's looking a bit rough.
Bruh.
Basically, I've got a deck builder with only one card, one enemy which doesn't even work, and the main mechanic for the character is not even implemented yet. But wait, I'm getting ahead of myself here. In case you haven't seen the first devlog, which seriously, go check it out. A few months ago, I started working on a grid-based roguelike deckbuilder, where you're trying to rescue your dog from a monster. A game that I'm making to honor my own dog, Saman. One of the core ideas for the game is that each character has a unique mechanic. For the demo, I'm focusing on the samurai, and his thing is a 3-stance system. A low stance for mobility, a mid stance for defense, and a high stance for damage. Alright, so now that you have some context, let's talk about how I went from this to this. Cause, call me crazy, but a deck builder with only one card sucks. First, I needed to implement the stance system. This is what makes the samurai unique, so it's kind of a big deal. The plan was simple. I just need to change the stances every time a card is played, following a clockwise rotation. Low, then high, then mid. Why this order? Well, low stance is great for positioning when you start a new turn. Then with the high stance you can deal more damage, which is after all the main goal. And finally, you will be able to protect yourself thanks to the mid stance if it's necessary. The goal here is to reward players that can manage their stances properly, rather than just trying to attack every time they have a chance to do so. I'm also considering adding an active ability to change stances once per turn, or to change it as much as you want, paying 1 mana each time. So what do you think? I will probably test both options later, but for now the only way to change stances is by playing cards. So if you end a turn in a bad stance, well, that's on you. Implementing this seemed quite simple. First, I needed a variable stored in the samurai to track the current stance. Then I created a helper function that triggers the right animations for each stance. So if the samurai is idle and in high stance, it will play the idle high animation, and so on. But of course, that's pretty useless without animations, so I had to create those. Animating is a long and tedious process. Luckily, I already did that weeks ago, so here it is, my cute little samurai. Please ignore the fact that his arms change length with every pose, and the fact that he most definitely broke his shoulder here. I'm doing my best, and so is he, alright? So the stance system was up and running, but I still needed to make the cards actually care about it. Because the stances look cool and all, but the cards, yeah, they couldn't care less. Here's the plan I came up with. Each card needs to check the current stance before it can be played. Some cards will only work in high stance, while others may work in any stance, but offer a bonus effect if you're in the right one. Now, to make it all come together, I just need 2 variables. One for the required stance, and one for the special stance. With these 2 variables, I will be able to check whether a card can be played based on your current stance. Whenever you draw a card, it will check if your stance matches the required one. And of course, every time you change stances, the system will need to recheck, because if it didn't, well, it wouldn't work, obviously. I can also use the special stance to apply some extra effects, like increased damage or maybe even a stun. In my game, you don't discard your hand at the end of the turn. So thanks to the system, you can also decide to move away and keep your current stance, to then unleash a full combo the next turn, giving more strategic depth to the game. And now, here's the result. Looking good, right? Good enough for you to wishlist the game right now, hopefully. As you can see, the card deals a lot of damage to an adjacent enemy, and if you're in a low stance, the range is increased to 3. So the stance system is working, which means the samurai is ready. Except, as I already said, he only has 1 card. Now, I'm not gonna create every card just yet, but I want at least 4 or 5 to make sure that every system works properly. And the first, or well, second card I created is Retreating Cut. With it, you can attack an adjacent enemy and then move 1 tile in the opposite direction. So I will just clone this card, change the range, damage and description, and in the script I will tell it to move in the opposite direction after attacking. And here's the result. Next, the Blade Whirl, whatever. With this attack, you strike all surrounding tiles, costing 2 mana. but if you're in high stance, the cost is reduced to 1. This card is pretty easy to develop. I just need to take all surrounding tiles and apply damage on each of them. Oh, by the way, I forgot to explain. The way I deal damage is just by creating an area with a stat for the damage, and then I place it inside the tile. When the enemy detects this area, it receives damage. I could go for a more data-oriented and probably more efficient approach, getting the positions of the enemies respective to the tile map or whatever. But this way I can just check if it's working properly by toggling on this option to see every collision, so it's just much easier for me. And next we have the Swift Slash. This one deals damage to the 3 tiles in the direction that you attack, and if you're in high stance, it will deal twice as much to the enemy in the central tile. And the 5th card, which I personally love, and wasn't even in the initial plan, is the Shadow Step. It requires a low stance and it lets you teleport to a new tile, to then strike all adjacent enemies. But if there are no adjacent enemies you won't attack, so you will keep the low stance. It's not the most powerful card, but its high utility hopefully makes up for it. And with these 5 cards, the combat is looking like this. Not bad, right? But I cannot really call this a combat system. This is just a bullying system. You can attack the skeletons, but they cannot do anything other than walking towards you. So, the skeleton needs a way to attack, and it's about time he received some animations as well. As I said in the previous video, I'm using this asset for the skeleton, and the idle, death, and walking animations are exactly the same. I just changed the skull, and I gave him arms because, well, arms are useful. There was no attack or hit animation, so I created those myself, and I'm pretty happy with the result. I once again tried to create a scalable system where, depending on the range and the attack pattern, each enemy will behave differently. And with that, I created the on-hit animation for the player. Well, 3 animations because, 3 stances and all that. And I also added some logic for the player to look at the enemy attacking him. Mostly because otherwise it looked really weird, moving towards the attacker if you're looking away. And that's it. Players and enemies can kill each other now. So the combat should be ready, except for this nasty card right here, the Shadow Step. I know, I said I love it, but basically there was an issue causing the game to crash whenever you selected a new tile to move to. But it only happens sometimes. My first guess was that it had something to do with overlapping collisions, but after checking that and changing the collision sizes, I found that that wasn't the case at all. Then I realized that maybe the game wasn't checking the mouse entered and mouse exit fast enough. As you can see here, these prints should not be possible. Before changing the area, it should always turn null first. The problem with this is that there's no fix, at least not one that I can come up with. If the FPS are low and the game doesn't detect the collision because of it, or if it takes a long time to emit the signals, there isn't much that I can do about it. But luckily I managed to create a workaround. Basically, when you play a card, if the target tile somehow became null, it will return the area currently under your mouse. It's not exactly the approach that I had in mind, but it works. I still don't understand why the highlight system works, and this one doesn't, but whatever. If anyone knows any tricks to solve this issue in a different way, I'm all ears. You can drop any tips in the comments. But anyways, at this point you could get hurt, and so could the enemies. But you had no way of knowing how much health you have left. So I created this pretty cool animated UI. And one of the members of my Discord gave me an amazing idea. Changing the animation speed depending on how much health you have left. Link to the Discord in the description, by the way. For the enemies, I wanted to create a tooltip, similar to the one you can see when you hover a card. There, I would show the enemy's health, their name, their block if they have any, and also a short description, like their actions per turn, and stuff like that. I thought about creating a range visualization as well, but I've decided to do that only for the attack range and not the movement range, as that would be a bit confusing. The last 2 things I wanted to add were the background, because I'm tired of this basic Godot background, and the UI element to visualize your current stance. The background was ready, because I created it for Steam's screenshot. The one thing I changed was adding a slight parallax effect based on the mouse position, which I think makes the game a bit more dynamic. Lately, I've noticed a pattern with indie games that went viral, like Vampire Survivors, Balatro, and all those games. Basically, every single interaction, whether it's clicking, hovering, moving your mouse, or whatever, has some feedback. It's basically a constant source of dopamine. I don't really know how ethical it is, which is why I'm not gonna use a slot machine as a test. Goes for you, Vampire Survivors. But I want the players to receive feedback for every action. And since I wanted lots of feedback, of course I had to add some camera shake when you attack an enemy, and when they attack you. I also added a small zoom in, which I think looks decent, but I'm not sure, so please let me know what you think. Then, the stance UI is just a simple Node 2D with a sprite and an animation. When you change stances, it wiggles a bit and highlights your current stance. So here's the final result. I know, it doesn't have any sound like the initial clip. That may have been a bit of clickbait, or retention bait, or whatever. The thing is, I want to dedicate an entire episode to sound design, but I didn't have time to implement it just yet. So, what are you waiting for? Go visit Rogue Inferno, link in the description, like, subscribe, and check the first devlog here. See ya!